So, respect. There are 5 reasons that we can't get respect. And so I'll bring that card up so you can see this. And you'll be able to see this as one of the slides, or if you're fortunate enough, you may have gotten this in the mail. And so there are 5 reasons that we typically don't get respect. First of all, one of the reasons that we don't get respect is we don't respect people who say, "Do as I say and not as I do." Because we typically believe that if it's good enough for the goose, then it's good enough for the gander. Or if it's good enough for you, then it should be good enough for me, and vice versa. And so we respect people who stand for their principles and do what they say, and say what it is that they're going to do. And so that's a place where we are able to give someone respect. Number 2 is we don't respect people who say, "You have to earn my respect." One of the things that I found very interesting is that it is utterly impossible to earn someone's respect. And what I mean by that is that typically when people say you have to earn my respect, that the methodology, the measurements are pretty ambiguous about what it means to earn respect. And so it becomes very difficult to earn someone's respect. For example, when I was 9, I was infatuated with this young lady that was in our youth group. Her name was Ruthie Furlow, and Ruthie was 13. Back then I was into older women. So as a 13-year-old, she would be with the older teens and I would be hanging out with the kids. And so one day I must have caught her eye and caught her attention. And so she calls me and she says, "Andre, can you come here for a second?" And so I come over and she said, "Can you go get me a soda?" Right? And so I kind of look at her and she's standing with the rest of the teens, and you know, I want to be cool, so I want to do what she's requesting, and so I run and I go get her a soda. Well, I bring the soda over and I kind of stand there and look at her, you know, with these approving eyes, and she looks at me and she says, "Oh, you're so nice." And she says, "You know what? Can you go get me some potato chips?" And so I kind of look at her and you know, I'm feeling in my pocket, and she's not giving any sense that she's going to give me some money to go get her some potato chips. So I reach in my pocket and I had just enough to get some potato chips. And so I go to the machine and then I run over to the machine and I get the potato chips and I bring them over to her. And she looks at me and she says, "Oh, you're so nice." And then she turns to her sister and she says, "Do you want anything?" Well, I recognize that she's asking her sister because she has an expectation that I am going to go get her sister something to eat as well. And so I took that opportunity to take my leave, because it was very clear to me that I was not going to get the level of respect from her that I thought that I wanted. And so we cannot earn someone's respect. And I'm going to come back to that concept in just a second. We also don't respect people who say that boys will be boys, or this is how things have always been, so why is there a need for change? And it's difficult to respect those folks because we understand that times change. There is a reason why the dinosaurs are not here today, because the environment changed and they could not adapt. And so we typically find it difficult to give someone respect who doesn't recognize the need for change. Number 4, we typically don't respect someone who doesn't understand that we all have a responsibility to do something. One of the things that I do is I pick up the trash in my yard. I did not put it there, but it is my responsibility to do it. And if I don't do it, I can't count on someone else to do it for me. I don't know if you've ever gotten into an elevator and waited for someone to push your floor. I would venture to say that if you've done that, it's probably taken you longer to get to your floor than if you actually press the floor yourself. And so all too often we don't give those folks respect, and we can't find a place for them in terms of being respectful, because they don't take responsibility for things that they could take responsibility for. And fifthly, the fifth point being that disrespect is a form of violence. And so when physical violence is impacted or enacted on an individual, what is the emotional residue of that act of violence? Typically it is fear, it is anger, it is resentment. And I would suggest to you that when someone's been disrespected, or when someone has been a victim of sarcasm, or when someone has been the center of a mean-spirited joke, or a person has been a victim of bullying, that those same emotions that happen when physical violence is enacted, those same emotions show up in that individual, that of fear, of anger, of resentment, of retaliation. And so once we start understanding that disrespect is a form of violence, that it is on the violence continuum, that before someone can be physically, or typically before someone has had physical violence, that disrespect has been a precursor to that form of violence. And so sarcasm, cursing, are all forms of violence that lead ultimately to some kind of physical violence if left unchecked. And so when I think about that, and I think about this concept of earning someone's respect, authentic respect comes in the face of disrespect. I've told this story a number of times, and I'll keep it brief for this particular presentation, but I tell this story of being in a restaurant bar, and so I'm sitting at the counter, and there's a man at the end of the counter who is red-faced and drunk. And so I order my food, and I close the menu, I hand it back to the server, and the man makes his way from the end of the bar right next to me. And I'm not afraid of individuals, but drunk people are typically pretty unpredictable. And so in this particular situation, the man comes, sits next to me, and we start small talk. And then he breaks into his thesis, the reason he came to sit next to me. And so he says to me, I don't like, and he says this derogatory term, most often called the N-word. In the United States, oftentimes older folks would refer to Brazil nuts with this same kind of N-word. In other places it might be referred to as a kafir or a black, or in a really derogatory sense. And so I look at that, and I'm really kind of shocked by that. And so I said, sir, when you use that word, what are you talking about? And he talks about the fact that he's talking about people who are uneducated, who are living off the system, people who are lazy. And so I turned to him and I said, sir, well, do you know any white people who fit that description? And he says, yeah. So I changed the subject, and so I started talking about something different, and then he comes back to me and he says, you know what? I don't like people, and he uses that derogatory term again, that are like that, but I like you. And so I'm a little bit taken back by this, and so I said, sir, what do you mean by that? And so he says, well, I like the fact that you're intelligent, you have a good head on your shoulders, and whatnot. And so I say to him, I said, sir, what if all the people that you met that you think look like me, all the people that you have met that you think look like me, were idiots, and everyone else that you don't know is just like me? And so he turns to me and he says, I gotta pee. And so he goes off to the restroom. I'm feeling pretty good because there hasn't been any major altercations with this gentleman. And so I gather my things and I start heading towards the door. And here comes this gentleman meeting me on my way out of the door. But there's some things that are different about him. His hair's combed over to the side. He's got water driplets on his face. And he has a damp napkin. And he reaches out to me with this damp napkin and he says, I raise chickens. If you ever need fresh eggs, give me a call. And on the damp napkin was his telephone number, and so I took the damp napkin, and I went my way and he went his way. As a side note, I did not call him. There's a whole nother workshop on that. But what happened for that man? Would you have understood if he called me that name, that nasty, dirty name, and I had gone off on him, that I had given him a piece of my mind? Would you have understood if that happened? Of course you would have understood. But if I had done that for him, what would have been the result? I would have solidified everything that he thought about people who he thinks look like me. And so all too often, what we don't do is we don't stand up. We don't give people opportunities to learn, change, and grow. And we don't create authentic relationships. We don't give people those opportunities, and we don't create opportunities to help people to learn something from their behaviors. And so what I'd like to suggest is that respect, authentic respect, has to be given in the face of disrespect. That in the face of disrespect, authentic respect shows itself. And is it easy to be nice to someone or give respect to someone who's being respectful to you? Of course it is. But those of us who are leaders, those of us who stand in front of groups, those of us who make it our business to help direct organizations are not called to do the easy thing. And so in the face of disrespect, the true measure of respect is not how someone else responds, but it's how you respond in that face of that difficult choice that one has to make. And so I suggest that the 5 things that make it difficult to give respect, the fact that people say, do as I say, not as I do, that people say we have to earn their respect, that people say that boys will be boys, or people say that's not my child, or that disrespect is a form of violence. There is only one way to get respect, and it is to give it. And that, my friend, is today's principle.